Honourable Member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow on from the remarks made by the former Speaker, particularly in the context of the importance of immunisation, particularly related to children's health, and some of the, I have to say, stories that she has recited, particularly around some of the behaviour of people who are opposed to immunisation and the consequences when people are in traumatised stages of life. And I think everybody in this place, regardless of their circumstances, knows that when families, children are vulnerable and particularly related to terminal diseases, that we have to make sure that we always show a high degree of respect, not to use it as the basis in which we advance our own political causes or arguments. I only wish to make some brief remarks around this piece of legislation to highlight the Turnbull government's commitment to the importance of improving vaccination rates amongst Australians, because since the introduction of the no jab, no pay policy, the government has seen over 200,000 extra children vaccinated in just over a year. Deputy Speaker, when I was in my former capacity as Human Rights Commissioner, I often got people coming to speak to me. Sorry? And a good one. Well, that's very kind of you, Ms. It's very kind of the member for Bowen, that I had people regularly coming to me, the member for Bowman, about the so-called human rights abuses that occurred as a consequence of this policy. And I've got to say that the arguments that were always presented to me were farcical. Firstly, because, of course, adults have a choice about what they decide to put in their body. They're of sound mind, mature mind, and are able to put themselves in a position to make judgment calls. That has not been the case for children. We've always had different laws that apply to children. And we always should have different laws that apply to children because their maturity, their lack of experience, their lack of understanding in terms of their capacity to do things means that, for instance, we don't allow them to drink at a certain age. We don't allow people, let's face it, to vote for the people who sit into this parliament at a certain age, and they have to make sure that parents take a degree of responsibility to guide them as part of their nurturing journey towards adulthood. And so policies like no jab, no pay are not within the framework of human rights. In fact, if you want to go down the sort of international legal path, which I've got to say I'm not a big fan of, but that's a separate point, if you go and look at human rights, they essentially apply to adults. When we're talking about rights, we're talking about the rights of the child, and particularly around the relationship of the parent to the child, and that includes the right to raise children in the traditions and customs or culture of a family, the family's background. Equally, for parents to be able to make decisions in the best interest of their children, particularly when it comes down to issues around the relationship to health. So this is not a human rights issue in the way that some people would like to frame it. It's about making sure we take care of children. We make sure that children are in the best position, not just to make their way to adulthood, but to make their way to adulthood in a healthy way and a healthy manner. Since the implementation of the AIR Act from the 1st of January of last year, feedback from a range of health professionals has indicated that this means highly qualified medical specialists such as paediatricians, infectious disease physicians, public health physicians and clinical immunologists are required to refer patients back to their GP for assessment of medical exemptions recognised by the Immunisation Register, and this can create complex pathways of care, including multiple practitioner visits. Based on the feedback, this bill proposes to address these two issues by amending the Act to extend the range of specialists who can provide assessments of medical exemptions recognised by the AIR, making it explicit that only recognised vaccination providers are able to provide vaccination information to the AIR and not members of the public and parents. This bill will affect paediatricians, public health physicians, infectious disease physicians and clinical immunologists who will be able to have assessments of medical exemptions recognised by the AIR for family assistance payment purposes in addition to general practitioners. Streamlining the way individuals are assessed for a medical exemption through the above-mentioned medical practitioners will also reduce the time taken for a small number of individuals who obtain a medical exemption for immunisation through these medical specialists. I'm sure all members of the parliament, well, I hope all members of the parliament will recognise the simple reforms proposed in this piece of legislation is not just consistent with government policy and taking care and our collective commitment to taking care of children, but it's a pathway to make sure that we're implementing sensible, practical policies to improve the lives of children so that they can have the best chance of growing up to being healthy, happy adults. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the